My topic is anti-Semitism in settler colonial studies and written resistance. Settler colonial studies were founded by the Australian Patrick Wolfe, an anthropologist, and the concept settler colonialism gained traction. Wolfe first introduced this concept in his 1999 book titled Settler Colonialism and the Transformation of Anthropology. But there he mainly discussed the concept in the context of the United States and Australia. It took several years for Wolfe to apply this concept on Israel. That happened in 2006 in his seminal article titled Settler Colonialism and the Elimination of the Native. This article has been viewed more than 700,000 times, and it's been quoted in academic papers close to 4,000 times. Yeah. There we got it. Great, excellent. Thanks for the tech assistance. And there we will proceed to the next slide. Like this. Wolfe's book of 1999 had its precursors. Patrick Wolfe was not the first one to apply the term colonialism on Israel. Early examples include Fayez Sayegh, whose highly anti-Semitic pamphlet was published by the PLO Research Center in Beirut, and more famously Maxime Rodinson, Israel, a colonial settler state, originally in French. And Wolfe actually admits having read Maxime Rodinson, and when he starts to recollect Rodinson's influence, he actually also admits that it was not all that structural and compelling how he originally remembered it when he got back to this work. But anyway, Patrick Wolfe is the one who became famous, and his name is associated to this concept. I've studied Patrick Wolfe's literary production in the light of the IRA definition and also anti-Semitic tropes. With an open mind, I was initially curious to find out whether Wolfe can be caught red-handed with anti-Semitic expressions. It was quite evident with, for instance, Fayez Sayegh that his wordings were like vitriol. But what about Patrick Wolfe? Wolfe proceeds in a deductive way. He started in his early article from 2006 labeling Israel as a settler colonial state. He starts with this postulation, and from this general condemnation he proceeds to making more detailed observations. During the 10 years he was active from 2006 until his death in 2016, his trajectory went in this deductive spiral, starting with the general and going to details later on. After having postulated this fact, purported fact that Israel is settler colonial, he started like elaborating on Jews as colonizers. And finally, Wolff went on and erased the connection between Jews and the ancestral homeland. In settler colonialism and the elimination of the native, Wolff examines the relationship between settler colonialism and genocide. It is noteworthy that this article was published in a journal devoted to genocide studies. And Wolff writes about what he calls the logic of elimination. And he states that settler colonialism is inherently eliminatory, but not invariably genocidal. He kind of blurs the concepts and tells that, okay, it might be genocide, it might not be, but anyway, the notion of settler colonialism is kind of founded on the idea that the natives are to be eliminated. And in this article, Wolff also makes the anti-Semitic slip of writing about Goyim Rhine zones, which Zionists were supposed to establish. And this is, of course, an anti-Semitic Nazi comparison where Wolff kind of flips the concept. The original notion is Judenrein, and Wolff is kind of inferring that it's actually the Jews who are the modern Nazis. They are trying to make the land they are occupying free of Gentiles, Goyim Rhine. This is a key observation. It's not the language of a neutral scientist. It's not academic language. It's like highly inflammatory language, which is supposed to speak to the emotions of the reader. Wolff actually also makes some ideological confessions in some of his writings. He admits having taken part in anti-imperialistic protests against the war in Iraq. He told that he and his friends made a small Australian town a center of the global anti-imperialistic struggle. And he was at the same time kind of confused when he noted that some of the protesters were both pacifists and Zionists at the same time, which Wolff took for a total, like, it's impossible to be both at the same time. And there he also admitted having drawn inspiration from Maxime Rodinson. So the thinking of Wolff's roots, the roots of his thinking, they are clearly on the left, and his admirer Lorenzo Verrocchini actually also says that Wolff told him that he has always been a Marxist. It's very important when we go on developing this settler colonial, the trajectory of the settler colonial paradigm as it is present in the Students for Justice in Palestine movement and their publication, The Written Resistance, where settler colonialism is coupled with Marxism in a very blatant way. When Wolff started turning Jews into colonizers, he wrote about the so-called preconditions of Zionist colonialism, and he named this as a range of economic, technological, military, cultural, and moral attributes which constituted, according to Wolff, a combination of Euro-colonial history. And all this Wolff sums as so-called pre-accumulation. But Wolff fails to elaborate on this. The only pre-accumulation he actually identifies is Jewish money. And this is quite telling. It's kind of connected to the anti-Semitic tropes, like the Jewish greed, the Jewish capitalist. Woolf actually writes about the Zionists' insatiable appetite for territorial expansion. It's kind of rephrasing Jewish greed. And other anti-Semitic expressions in Woolf's text include Judeocracy. No one who's like seriously into political science or related studies would ever talk about Judeocracy. And the Nazi comparison returns in what Woolf describes as Israel's Herrenvolk theocracy. And his German is actually so bad that he doesn't know that Herrenvolk should be written with a capital H, I guess. That's Patrick Woolf. Finally, Woolf goes on in his last book before he dies, Traces of History, Elementary Structures of Race, where he introduces the Khazar hypothesis. I think you're aware of Arthur Koestler, Shlomo Zand, who popularized the notion that Ashkenazi Jews lack genetic continuity to the Jews of old, and they are supposed to be actually the descendants of the Khazar people who converted to Judaism roughly 1,000 years ago. And genetic studies have, however, disproved this theory. It's mainly acceptable in fringe political environments, the extreme right, etc. And those who take Woolf's settler colonial theory seriously, they should read Traces of History and the way Woolf presents the Khazar argument, which he maintains that severs the ties between Jews and the land. You don't have any genetic continuity, you don't have the claim of indigeneity. And Woolf actually says that Jews have usurped the claim of being indigenous to the land of Israel. But when he advances this very flimsy theory, he kind of dismantles his own theoretical structure. But that doesn't actually matter anymore, because Woolf had got his admirers by that time. It's like communists who profess to adhere to Marx, but they've never read Das Kapital. It's the same with settler colonial theory. You say the word settler colonial and that's quite enough. It's all there, it's written by a renowned scholar, but when you open his books and actually read his texts, there are the anti-Semitic expressions and there is the very poorly articulated Khazar hypothesis. Well, what about anti-Semitism then? Woolf tries to answer his critics. He tells that, okay, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and he relies on Hannah Arendt in defining anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism was a product of 18th and 19th century economic conditions in Germany. It's not the primordial hatred, writes Patrick Woolf, in the vein of Hannah Arendt. And there I think we have a great word of caution for us. because Woolf is not the only one who is quoting Arendt and using her way of belittling the primordial nature of anti-Semitism in order to kind of exonerate themselves. Woolf finds this very convenient. And there we have also a connection to wider perspectives on the Holocaust. Woolf is, in the same way as Hannah Arendt, connecting the Holocaust to post-colonialism. And in this tradition, the Holocaust is actually kind of appropriated by other victim groups. Woolf is part of a wider framework which builds on Hannah Arendt, and in the field of Holocaust studies there are those who follow Christopher Browning with the ordinary men explanation, which kind of minimizes the impact of anti-Semitism on the Holocaust. On the other hand, we have Robert Wistrich, David Nirenberg, who emphasize the primordial nature of anti-Semitism. And we have also Daniel Goldhagen, who writes about Hitler's willing executioners. This is kind of the Jewish perspective on both anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And then we have the sort of minimalist perspective represented by Hannah Arendt and Christopher Browning. Patrick Woolf connects his scholarship very much to this minimalist perspective, which belittles the primordial nature of anti-Semitism and also makes the Jewish experience universal, tries to appropriate the Jewish collective experience and makes Jews subordinate to other agendas, in this case settler colonialism. Briefly about Patrick Woolf's legacy. The Students for Justice in Palestine movement started to publish their newsletter, The Written Resistance, shortly before the October 7 terror attack on Israel. This excerpt is from volume 2 of The Written Resistance, where the editors quote Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, who says that there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. These people have taken up Patrick Woolf and the settler colonial paradigm, but they are like the Marxists who don't read Marx. Woolf has no documented direct connection with the Students for Justice in Palestine movement, but his catchword, settler colonialism, is repeated and repeated again and again. Just like Hannah Arendt's The Banality of Evil, settler colonialism has become a catchword, something that sounds smart when you utter it. You don't have to read the books, you don't have to read the articles, you just profess your creed. That's the legacy of Patrick Woolf. That's all, folks.